Effective and ineffective leadership. To him, leadership is not a title. Instead, it's an opportunity that people can grasp and choose to exercise in many different ways. He is currently the president and CEO of the Kansas Leadership Center. Please help me welcome Ed O'Malley.
All right, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, right? Good afternoon. This is day, what for you? Day 3? Day 2? Day 2.5, something like that. Fantastic. How about anybody from my alma mater, Cheyenne Mission South High School? Anybody? Nice. Wonderful, wonderful. How about from the school my kids will probably go to, Cape and Mount Carmel down in Wichita? Anybody? All right, fantastic. I've got another kid at Independent in Wichita. Anybody Independent High School? All right, fantastic. Well, hey, no matter where you're from, it's awesome that you are a part of this amazing experience. I wish I would have had this. I never had the chance to come to Boise State. It wasn't on my radar. It wasn't something that I had thought about. And it would have been incredibly helpful to me. I wound up in the legislature. I wound up as an aide to a governor, and now I have the privilege of running a statewide leadership center that is working to prepare people to be more effective in their communities, in their state. So having had the experience that you're having would have been so valuable to me. So I hope you cherish it. My purpose during these few minutes I have with you today is to talk a little bit about my time in the legislature, just a little bit about that. I know you have some debates coming up very soon. You have some elections after that, and you have a lot of legislative type activity, whether at the city level, the county level, or the state level, yet to come still this week. So I want to reflect just a little bit about my experience in the legislature and what you might be able to glean from that. I also want to share some key ideas about leadership. Some key ideas that, whether you realize it or not, a few thousand people every year throughout our state are trying to learn and are trying to implement in their exercise of leadership in their community. I want to share some of those ideas with you. You've been exposed to them a little bit already this week, but I want to share them with you as well. I'd also love to have a little bit of time for some Q&A. If you have some questions, I would love to try to answer them, or at least provide some insight into the question, even if I can't fully answer it. So I hope as I talk, you might be thinking about what's a question you might have, and I'll make sure we have some time for some Q&A. All right? Okay, so let me give you a little bit of background about me. I grew up in the Kansas City area. Prairie Village is my hometown. Anybody from Prairie Village? Okay, a few people, fantastic. Grew up in Prairie Village, Kansas. Had no experience in Boise State. How about student body government? Raise your hand if you're involved in student body government. Wow, awesome. Probably half the people in here. I had no experience in student body government. I never ran for office in my school. I never was involved with any campaigns in my school. I wasn't involved in any type of thing like that. Wound up here at K-State, and I studied history. And I thought I was going to become a history professor. That's what I thought my career was going to be. And at K-State, I didn't get involved in student body government. I didn't get involved in any type of civic or political type activity. But when you study history, you're really studying a lot about governments. You're studying a lot about politics. And over time, I began to get more and more interested in government and politics. And I wound up, long story here, after graduated, I'll make the story short. After I graduated, I was getting married in 6 weeks. You guys can't know what that feels like yet. But I was getting married in 6 weeks, and I didn't have a job. And while you don't know what that's going to feel like, let me tell you, it's a really bad feeling to be getting married in 6 weeks and not have a job. It makes you do desperate things. All right? Now, I didn't have a job. I was interested in government and politics. I was getting married in 6 weeks, and I had to find a job somehow. So I walked into Governor Bill Graves' office. Governor Bill Graves was governor of Kansas for 8 years, 2 terms. Walked into Governor Graves' office. I did not know a soul in the office. Knocked on one door, sweet talked my way past the person there, got to another door, knocked on that door, got past that door, got past the next door. Wound up a few hours later, I was in the chief of staff's office. And somehow, some way, that night I left with a job. So that was my first introduction to government, of politics. Right? So how valuable it would have been for me to have had the experience that you men are having. That would have been so valuable for me. My only experience with government and politics was my civics classes and reading about politics through history. So I wind up working for Governor Bill Graves. It was a phenomenal job. It wasn't a very fancy job. I was the director of constituent services, which basically meant that I was the person who supervised a very small staff of people that responded to every phone call, every letter, and back then we were starting to get emails. Every email that was sent to the governor, we would respond and work with the citizens on what was on their mind. Now I don't know, Dane, I don't know if there is a role called Director of Constituent Services for the gubernatorial candidates, but not yet. There could be. Okay, good. Well, it was a very fascinating experience. It gave me an exposure a mile wide and just an inch deep on the toughest issues facing the state of Kansas. I learned as much as I could in that job. I wound up a few years later in the legislature. I think I was 26 years old when I went into the legislature. Not much older than the men here assembled in this room. It was a fascinating experience. I came into the legislature. There are 165 members of the legislature, of course, 125 in the House, 40 in the Senate. And I came into the legislature with an unusually large class of 20-something legislators. I think there were 12 or 13 of us, all in our 20s, when we came into the State House. Now, how beneficial it would have been for me to have had the experience you men are having when I walked into that legislature. If I would have had the experience you're having, how much more prepared I would have been. Right? How much more effective I would have been. So I hope you're cherishing the experience you're having. Even as hard as it might be for you, I hope you're cherishing the experience. So I wound up in the legislature. I'm happy to answer some questions about that if you'd like. But I left the legislature. I've been reelected to a 3rd term. And shortly after being reelected, I was offered the opportunity to start this thing called the Kansas Leadership Center. And I won't belabor the description of the Kansas Leadership Center except to say it's a statewide effort designed to build the leadership capacity of a state so we have more people serving in elected office, appointed office, and nonprofit positions, and all sorts of civic roles and responsibilities. More people in the state of Kansas serving in key roles, able to exercise effective leadership. If you're curious to learn more about the Kansas Leadership Center, I'd love to talk with you offline sometime. Okay, now let me get to some key points here that I'd love to share with you. There are really 3 big things that are on my mind today. And the first one is about just what is leadership. And I'd love some help. I'd love for some people here to tell me how they define leadership. How do you define leadership? What is it exactly? And it's not a rhetorical question. I'd really love to see a few hands pop up and some guys with some loud voices share how they would define leadership. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Leadership is guiding people.
Hey, stand up so I can see who's talking. Sorry, the light's really tough. Go.
Leadership should be guidance both by example and by communication to the solution of a problem.
Yeah, I love it. Leadership should be guidance. Keep going. Say it again. Say it one more time.
Leadership should be guidance both by example and by communication to find a solution to a problem.
Leadership should be guidance both by example and by communication to find a solution to a problem. Love it. Thank you very much. There were some hands down here. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead and stand up for me.
One of my favorite, for me, leadership is integrity, selfless service.
Leadership is integrity and selfless service. That's what I heard him say. Awesome. How about a few more? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
You lead with every decision you make.
Every decision you make.
By example.
You're exercising leadership. Lead by example. Love it, love it. How about a few more? How about this half of the room is underrepresented in this participation so far? Yes, sir.
Leadership is, well, like what my friend up there said, for one thing, and then as well as challenging your peers to think critically.
Yeah, he talked about leader. He agreed with the comment earlier and also added that leadership is often about challenging your peers. I love that. About challenging your peers. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yes, sir.
We're all going to have the same thoughts, but I feel like leadership is your actions. How you portray yourself every day. Because it's character. That's what leadership is in mind. You can say a lot of stuff around people, but what you're doing behind closed doors.
I love it. Leadership is how you portray yourself, and it's about your character. About your character. I love it. Okay, let's do this. I'm gonna take one more, and then I'm gonna go. You've had your hand up, sir. Go ahead.
Leadership is when you know what got to be done, you know how to get it done.
Leadership is when you know what has to be done, and you know how to get it done. Okay, here's what I want you to do now. Because I want everybody to have a chance to articulate what they think leadership is. Right? So I want you to, in just a minute, I want you to turn to somebody sitting next to you. Okay? And you're going to each have 30 seconds to describe how you think of leadership. I don't think there necessarily is a wrong answer to this question. Okay? There could be lots of different right answers. But the point is, I want you to be consciously thinking about your definition of leadership. Then I'm going to share with you the definition of leadership that I began to develop through my time in the legislature and since then. So find a partner, 30 seconds each, whoever hand is larger goes first, okay? All right, that's what you're going to say, goes first, okay? Let's go, 30 seconds. Okay, so here's what I want to share with you now, okay? One is I hope that if nothing else comes from my brief time with you, I hope you'll be spending some time thinking about how you want to define leadership. And I hope that you will then work your best to hold yourself accountable to that definition. You don't have to adopt the definition I'm about to share with you. I'd love for you to rent the idea for a while, but you don't have to buy it. Most importantly, I just think you need to not float through life with the kind of ambiguous feelings about leadership. You need to know what it is to you, and you need to hold yourself accountable to it. Through my time in the legislature, and since then, I began to develop a definition of leadership that has been very disorienting to me and very helpful to me. And let me just tell you a little bit about how it evolved. I wind up in the legislature, and I'm so proud that first day. Okay, the day I'm going to get sworn in. Okay? So proud. Young guy there, all my family's there, just so proud. And my father, who always has a way of keeping me humble, later that day sends me a little bit of poetry. Samuel Johnson is the poet, an American poet named Samuel Johnson. And just 2 lines of poetry is all Dad sent me. Again, picture me now, I'm very proud, 26 years old, just sworn into the Kansas legislature, feeling like I'm really somebody. I'm really a leader. And Dad sends me this poetry, Samuel Johnson, 2 lines. Of all the human heart endures, how small the part, laws or kings, cause or cure. Of all the human heart endures, how small the part, laws or kings, cause or cure. So it was Dad's way of saying, hey, son, yeah, be proud, but understand that it's really just a role you have. And it's not the be-all, end-all. And it can't do all things. So that got me thinking about what is leadership. Some other things got me thinking while I was in the legislature. What I started to notice was that there were people there, we all had the same title. And I was in the House. We were all state representatives. 125 people with the same title. And what I started to notice is that even though we all had a fancy title, and that we all got mail addressed to us as the Honorable so-and-so, that some people were much more effective than others. Some people had a way of being able to mobilize people, and others had a way of just taking up airtime, taking up space. So I began to realize that there's a difference between the people. Something's different. We all have the same title, but something's different. And I kept thinking more and more about this, right? And eventually I leave the legislature to start the Kansas Leadership Center, and I start listening to all sorts of people all across Kansas. Went to every corner of Kansas with our team, talking to people, listening to them, asking them what type of leadership do we need more of. And Kansans began to articulate a type of leadership, a definition of leadership that I had begun to kind of play with in my head, although I wasn't smart enough to fully articulate when I was back in the legislature. And what Kansans told us, and that this is what I'd love for you to just think about. Kansans told us that we need more people who think of leadership as an activity, as something that happens. And to not think about it as connected to your position. So I loved all the definitions of leadership I heard from folks. And my experience has been that most people, when they think about leadership, when they think about quote-unquote leaders, they're thinking about those with the fancy titles. And what I'd love for you to be thinking about today is that leadership is about mobilizing people to make progress on tough challenges. Leadership is mobilizing people to make progress on tough challenges. So somebody's going to be elected governor, right? Later today? Later today. Somebody will be elected governor. The test about how you will know whether that person is an effective quote-unquote leader, you won't know that by their election today. You won't know that. All the election will tell you is that they got themselves elected. That's it. The fact that I got myself elected to the Kansas House of Representatives tells you nothing about whether I ever exercised leadership. What will tell you if they're effective is, do they mobilize people during the rest of this week to make progress on the daunting, presenting challenges? That's what leadership is, mobilizing people to make progress on the daunting challenges. My assumption is that there are going to be governors and mayors and city council members and county commissioners and all the different roles that people here have gotten elected to. There are going to be some people in those roles who exercise tremendous leadership during this week. And there will be others who struggle to exercise leadership. What I mean by that is there will be some people who are effective at mobilizing people to make progress on tough issues, and others who aren't effective, and hopefully learn a lot from this experience to help them become more effective in the future. But I also assume that there are plenty of people here who will not have a fancy title, who will not be elected governor or mayor or city council member or county commissioner or whatever other fancy title you might imagine. There'll be other people here without those fancy titles who will be incredibly effective at exercising leadership, at mobilizing people to make progress on tough issues. And there'll be other people here, also without the fancy titles this week, who aren't effective at mobilizing others to make progress on tough issues. So leadership is mobilizing people to make progress on daunting issues. It does not matter whether or not you have a fancy title. One thing I'd love for you to think about. Another thing I'd love to mention to you. Well, let me ask you a question first. How many people here, raise your hand if you have lost an election this week? Okay. A lot of people. I'm excited to hear that. Excited to see that. How did it feel? How did it feel? You just look forward to the next one. There's another one you want to go for, okay? Who else? Other folks, tell me how it felt to lose. Anybody? Yeah, yes, sir. Go ahead. Disappointing. What was so disappointing about it? Yeah, so he's talking about how it's disappointing because when you really want something, you get fired up for it. Okay, you really get fired up for it. It's disappointing for it not to happen. Yes, sir.
It's frustrating because you feel like you lost opportunity to make a difference.
Yeah, it's frustrating because it feels like you lost an opportunity to make a difference. Yeah. Yes, sir.
It was kind of humiliating, but at the same time it was humbling.
Yeah, kind of humiliating, but also humbling. Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? I mean, it's not fun. But it can be powerful too. Yes, sir. I love the honesty. It felt like crap for like 10 minutes. But then you got used to it, you got over it. Yeah, love it. Yeah. What else? Other thoughts? How did it feel? Other people? What's that?
I didn't feel good enough.
You didn't feel good enough?
No.
Stand up real quick. What do you mean?
I didn't feel good after I lost.
Tell me more.
I felt sad and humiliated in front of all my peers.
I heard you didn't feel good, you felt bad. You say, what felt so bad?
It's just like, I know you tried so hard for, stop laughing.
Yeah.
I know you tried so hard for something, you didn't get it, you know? They'll put all that effort into it and then just not getting it.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing. I mean, it can feel bad. And even in a situation like this, where it's a simulation, right? It's a simulation. But it can still feel bad, right? And that's hard. That can be hard. Somebody up here had their hand up. They're really good. Yes, and go all the way back, way back.
It's still possible to be effective without being in this position.
Yeah. Yeah, it is still possible to be effective without being in the position. And that's what I'd love for you guys to be thinking about. Yes, sir. Real loud.
When I lost for bullies, I didn't feel sad. I felt good because at least I tried to go for something.
Yeah, it can feel good. At least you tried, right? I mean, one of the things, my son is 11 years old, turns 11 in a few days. And one of the things I wished for him, and I work hard as his dad, is to help desensitize him to failure. Help desensitize him to failure. Get him to understand that the only failure is not trying. Trying and failing is okay, right? Okay? You've got to be desensitized to failure. Well, here's something I want you to think about. Something that came to me when I was in the legislature, something I began to think about and I've thought about since. And something that you may have begun to hear the term adaptive challenges or adaptive leadership. Dane, the first night, may have talked about that just a little bit. When exercising leadership on adaptive challenges, here's something I want you to think about. The difference between yourself and the role you play. The difference between your goal and the strategy to get there. Your goal and the strategy to get there. So, I want to be really frank with you. I know a lot of people. I know a lot of people who are my age, some who are older, some who are a little bit younger, who were in these seats at Boise State years ago. They were lucky, unlike me. They knew about this. They found a way here. They got to participate. And they loved the experience. They relished the experience. Many of these friends of mine who were involved in Boise State back in the day became very active in civic life, have stayed very active in civic life, and many of them are in key elected roles and positions in our state today. And for some of them, achieving the position has been a goal of theirs for 20 years. To get elected to whatever it might be. My guess is there's some of you who came here with the goal of being elected governor of Boise State. My guess is there's more than one of you. One of you will get elected, and my guess is there's more than one of you who came with that goal. And there are plenty of you who probably came without that goal. The idea I'm trying to convey is you need to understand what's your goal and what's the strategy to get there. And if your goal becomes getting the position, I'm worried you'll never be as successful as you can be. If your goal is to make whatever type of difference you're wanting to make, and the strategy to get there is to get yourself elected to something, that's just fine. But understanding the difference between your goal and your strategy to get there, and understanding that you can have up to different strategies. You can have 5 strategies, 6 strategies, a dozen strategies, 20 strategies to accomplish the goal. It's absolutely critical. We don't have too many minutes left. I'd love to pause for a minute and see if you have any questions about what life is like in the legislature, or any questions about what you've heard from me so far. And I'm really curious what you're thinking about and learning about related to leadership and legislative activity and things like that. So let me just pause and see if there are any questions out there. Yes, sir.
Yeah. How did you make the jump from just working? How did you make the jump from just working in the governor's office to being a legislature in such a short time?
Yeah, the question was, how did I make the jump from working in the governor's office to being in the legislature in such a short time? So it's all about, it kind of relates to the last thing I was just talking about. It's all about understanding what's your goal and what are the different strategies that can help you get there. So it might sound cheesy, right? But my goal with my life has been to be a life of service, to help other people. And I got to the point when I was in the governor's office where I realized that if I wanted to be more effective at that, I needed to get more involved locally in my home community. So I left that a step between the governor and the legislature. I worked for the Overland Park Chamber of Commerce in between there, doing government relations. So I talked my way into a job there at the Chamber of Commerce. And part of politics is about timing. This is why I don't think any of you should ever leave here thinking to yourself that you're going to be a congressman, or you're going to be a senator, or you're going to be a mayor. So much of this is timing. So I happen to live in a district where my state representative, just a couple years after I started working for the Chamber of Commerce, he was going to retire. He came to me and he asked me if I would run to take his place. So a lot of it's about timing. A lot of it is about putting yourself in the right position at the right time. And then ultimately, it's about the risk involved. You heard people talk about what it feels like to lose. When you go run for something, you know what it could feel like. You lose. And the risk to jump off anyway. It's how it works for me. Appreciate your question. Yes, sir. And then down here. Sir.
Hello, my name is Dylan III. I can't at Oswego, Wyandotte County. I'd like to ask, who is your inspiration?
Who is my inspiration? I study history. You have all kinds of inspiration of historical figures, but to me, my inspiration was an aunt of mine. I think of the most back to that moment when I was deciding whether or not to run for office or not. I have a dear aunt who was never involved in politics, but she happened to be a nun. She spent her life in service of helping life be better for other people. And I probably thought about her every single day I was in the legislature, wondering if I was living up to her example. She probably had a tougher job than I did, but I was trying to live up to her example. Yes, sir.
Hi, I aspire to own my own business. I was wondering if you have any tips on how to get there.
Tell me, the question was, I aspire to own my own business. He's wondering if I have any tips on how to get there. Let me just ask you a quick question. What is it about owning your own business? Why do you want to own your own business?
I want to help people on a global scale.
You want to help people on a global scale. Okay, so your purpose sounds to me like you want to help people on a global scale. Your goal. One strategy to do that is to own your own business. So that's one strategy. There could be another strategy this way. There could be another strategy coming in from the top. There could be another strategy. Right? There could be lots of strategies that could help you achieve the purpose. So my tip to you would be stay clear on what your purpose is and understand that owning your own business is one strategy to accomplish that purpose. And there are lots of people who can help you with that strategy. Don't try to do it all by yourself. Lots of people who could help you with how do you go about owning your own business. But understand that it sounds to me like it's a strategy, and don't get too locked into that strategy. There could be lots of others. I think we might have 4 minutes left, so I have time for maybe one more question or two, and then I'm going to give you a final thought. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
In chasing an electoral spot when trying to get elected, all politics aside, what parts of your interpersonal self do you like to show to the public?
The question was, in electoral politics, what parts of my internal self do I like to show? You know, I think it's very important to be vulnerable. And the reason I guess the way I'd answer your question is I tried to the best degree I could, and I failed often. I tried to just simply be who I am. I tried to be very honest with people about my shortcomings. I tried to admit when I had not a clue what the right answer was. You know, you're about to watch a bunch of debates. You know? And every debate I was in, there's always a question asked that I wasn't ready for. And early on, my temptation was to fake it and make up an answer. And I actually learned that, for me at least, it was more effective for me just to acknowledge that that's a great question. I don't know if I know the right answer to that. I'd be excited to learn from my constituents how to answer that question. So I'm rambling a bit, but I think there's something about vulnerability that's very important. You know, we don't fall into the trap of believing that if you're going to be effective at leading other people, that you have to be perfect. Everybody knows you're not. Everybody knows you're not perfect. So don't fall into the trap of pretending like you have to be in order to be effective at leading other people. Whether that's through a formal elective office or whether it's through informal efforts that you're a part of. None of us are perfect. And my experience has been the more I can just demonstrate and show that, the more effective I was able to be. And when I tried to cover up my imperfections, when I tried to disguise them, when I tried to sweep them under the rug, is when I tended to be less effective. I appreciate the question. I want to just close with this final comment. I understand that this is a very busy week for you. I understand there are a lot of moving parts to this experience. And I understand the temptation could be to work really, really hard just to figure out what the heck you're supposed to be doing. Right? And my advice to you would be to get really clear for the remainder of this week about what your purpose is for being here. Why are you here? What do you want out of this experience? I didn't get to have it. Right? So I'm jealous. I want to make sure you use this experience. What is your purpose for being here? And get clear on that. It might be to discover who you really are. It might be to taste failure. It might be to taste success. It might be to develop new relationships. It might be to learn what does it mean to lead. Figure out what it is for you. And focus your efforts on achieving that purpose during these next 5 or 6 days. Don't get swept up in the busyness of Boise State. Be purposeful. Be purposeful as to what you're trying to accomplish. If you can do that here, you can do that out there. If you can figure out how to achieve your purpose here at Boise State, you can figure out how to achieve your purpose back at your school, at your university, wherever you end up later in life. If I can ever be of help, please let me know. Good luck the rest of the week. Congratulations on being here.